November 22nd, 1963. A day that didn't just change America, it shattered it. A day that took a living, breathing, laughing young president and turned him into a ghost that still haunts this nation more than 60 years later. But here is what nobody tells you. Here is what the textbooks left out. Here is what was buried so deep that most Americans have lived their entire lives without ever knowing the full truth of what happened in those final 24 hours. My name is Professor Richard, and today on Declassified Presidents, we are opening the file they never wanted you to read. It started the night before. November 21st, 1963. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was not supposed to be in Texas at all. His closest advisors warned him. His security team had serious concerns. Texas was hostile political territory for Kennedy. There had already been an ugly incident just weeks earlier when Adlai Stevenson, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, had been spat on and struck with a protest sign on the streets of Dallas. When Stevenson personally called the White House and told Kennedy's team that Dallas was not safe, that something felt wrong, that the atmosphere in that city was dangerous and dark, the warning was noted, filed away, and ignored. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself who made that decision, because that question leads somewhere very uncomfortable. Kennedy arrived in San Antonio on the evening of November 21st in good spirits. Photographs from that night show him smiling, waving, completely alive with that electric charisma that made America fall in love with him. Jackie was by his side in a pale blue suit, radiant, laughing. They attended a dinner in Houston, then flew to Fort Worth where they spent the night at the Hotel Texas. And this is the detail that stops people cold when they hear it for the first time. That night, in their hotel room, John Kennedy looked out at the Fort Worth skyline and told his wife Jackie something that she would never forget for the rest of her life. He said, "Jackie, if somebody wants to shoot me from a window with a rifle, nobody can stop it. So why worry about it?" Let that sentence sit with you for a moment. The President of the United States said those words the night before he was killed. That was not a man unaware of the danger around him. That was a man who had accepted something. But what had he accepted, and why? The morning of November 22nd began beautifully. Kennedy woke early, stepped outside the Hotel Texas into a light rain, and was greeted by a crowd of thousands of Americans who had stood outside all night in the wet and the cold just to catch one glimpse of their president. He was deeply moved by this. People who were there that morning say he looked at that crowd with something in his eyes that was almost like sadness mixed with gratitude. He went back inside, had breakfast with Jackie, and made several phone calls. One of those phone calls, which only became known through declassified records years later, was to his brother Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General of the United States. The contents of that call have never been fully revealed. Robert Kennedy himself, before his own assassination 5 years later, refused to discuss what was said. That silence is a door that history has never fully opened. At 11:37 in the morning, Air Force One landed at Dallas Love Field. The sun had come out. The rain was gone. The sky was blue and clear. Jackie Kennedy stepped off the plane in her iconic pink Chanel suit, a color she had chosen carefully that morning because she wanted to look her best for the people of Dallas. She wanted them to see the First Lady at her finest. She would be wearing that same suit, soaked in her husband's blood, when Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as president just hours later. She refused to change. She wanted the world to see what had been done. That single decision by Jackie Kennedy in those moments of unimaginable grief was one of the most powerful and deliberate acts in American political history, and most people have never understood why she did it. The motorcade began moving through Dallas at 11:50 in the morning. The crowds were enormous, far bigger than anyone had expected. People lined every street, hanging from windows, climbing lampposts, screaming the president's name. Kennedy was visibly moved. He repeatedly asked the Secret Service to slow the motorcade down so he could see the people better. Think about that. In the very moments that would lead to his death, John Kennedy was slowing down to connect with the American people he loved. The motorcade turned onto Elm Street at 12:29 p.m. The Texas School Book Depository building was on the right. The grassy knoll was ahead. Dealey Plaza was bathed in sunlight. Everything was perfect. Everything was ordinary. And then the world ended. The first shot rang out at 12:30 p.m. Governor John Connally, sitting in front of Kennedy, later described the sound as an explosion. Jackie Kennedy turned to look at her husband. What she saw in that fraction of a second is something she described only once, in a private recorded account that was sealed for decades. She said he had a look on his face of total surprise. Not pain, not fear, just pure surprise. As if he could not believe what was happening to him. The second shot changed everything. And here is where this story goes from tragedy to mystery. Because in the decades that followed, more than 2,000 documents related to the assassination were classified and hidden from the American public. Presidents after presidents chose to keep those files sealed. Ask yourself, what is in those documents that is so dangerous that the United States government decided the American people could not handle reading them? In the chaos that followed the shooting, Jackie Kennedy climbed onto the back of the moving limousine. This was not panic. Secret Service agent Clint Hill, who rushed toward the car in those terrible seconds, said later that she was reaching for a piece of her husband's skull that had landed on the back of the car. She was trying to put him back together. If that image does not break something inside you, then nothing will. This was a woman on her hands and knees on the back of a speeding presidential limousine in the bright Dallas sunshine, trying to save her husband with her bare hands. And the world watched. And the world was never the same again. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was pronounced dead at Parkland Memorial Hospital at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on November 22, 1963. He was 46 years old. He had been president for 1,036 days. In those 1,036 days, he had navigated the Cuban Missile Crisis and prevented a nuclear war, signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, launched the space program that would put a man on the moon, and begun the process of pushing for the Civil Rights Act that would change the face of America forever. He was not a perfect man. History has shown us that clearly. But he was a president who made Americans believe that their country could be something extraordinary. And when that bullet tore through Dealey Plaza, it did not just kill a man. It killed a version of America that has never fully come back. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested that afternoon and charged with the assassination. 2 days later, before he could stand trial, before he could speak publicly, before he could tell the world whatever it was he knew, Jack Ruby walked into the Dallas Police Department basement and shot him dead on live national television. An entire nation watched a murder happen in real time. Ruby was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. He appealed the conviction and was granted a new trial. But before that trial could happen, Jack Ruby died in prison of lung cancer in January 1967. On his deathbed, he told reporters he wanted to tell the truth about what happened, but that he would never be allowed to do so. He said the real story would never come out while certain people were still alive. Those people he was referring to, he never named. He took those names to his grave. And somewhere in America tonight, those files are still sitting in government archives with black lines through the most important sentences. And Professor Richard wants you to think very carefully about what that means. Because Declassified Presidents will be here every week pulling back the curtain on the history they decided you were not ready for. Subscribe. Because we are just getting started.